She wasn't someone who liked to stand out. Most people in school didn't notice her much. She was quiet, always sitting near the back, always keeping to herself. But there was one thing that made her different. She loved to sing, not for attention, not for fame. Just because singing made her feel alive. When life felt heavy, she sang. When no one listened, music did. At home, when the house was empty, she would sing freely. The walls of her room knew every note. The mirror in front of her bed had seen her perform more times than anyone else. That mirror had watched her laugh, cry, and smile while holding a hairbrush like a microphone. Her voice was soft but full of emotion. She didn't have expensive vocal lessons or fancy equipment, but her heart was always in her voice. She sang about things she felt, but didn't have the courage to say out loud. At school, no one really knew she had this gift. She never sang. In class, never joined music club. Not because she didn't want to, but because she was afraid. Afraid someone might laugh. Afraid they might say she wasn't good enough. So she kept it a secret. Only her best friend knew. Sometimes they would sit under a tree during lunch break. Her friend would beg her to sing. She would look around, make sure no one was watching, and then softly sing a few lines. Her friend would just smile and say, "You're amazing." She never believed it, though. She didn't think she was anything special. She just loved the feeling she got when she sang. It was like all her worries disappeared. Then one day something changed. The school announced they were holding a music talent show. Anyone could join. Singers, dancers, guitar players, anyone who wanted to perform. Her heart started beating fast when she heard the announcement. Something inside her whispered, "Maybe this is your chance." But right after that, another voice inside her head said, "What if you mess up? What if they laugh?" That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about it. What if she could finally show the world who she really was? What if she could sing on a real stage under real lights with real people listening? The next day, she stood outside the sign-up sheet. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. She stared at the list of names already written down. A few popular students had already signed up. Everyone would be watching them. She stood there for almost 10 minutes, unsure of what to do. Then she took a deep breath, picked up the pen, and wrote her name. Her hand trembled as she did it. Afterward, she quickly walked away without looking back. Later that evening in her room, she turned on her little speaker, chose a slow emotional song, and started practicing. She stood in front of her mirror, like always. But this time, she imagined a crowd. She imagined lights shining down on her. She didn't know what would happen. She didn't know if she would even make it past the audition. But deep down, she had taken the first step. And that step mattered. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about showing off. It was about finally facing the fear that had kept her quiet for so long. For the first time, she let the thought enter her heart, maybe her voice did deserve to be heard. Maybe someone out there needed to hear her song. The next morning at school felt different. Her name was on the audition list now. That one small act had made her feel brave, but also scared. She didn't talk about it with anyone, not even her closest friend. She kept her head down, walked through the halls, and tried to stay calm. Inside, though, her heart was racing. She kept thinking about the audition. It was only a few days away. Her name was listed between others she recognized, students who were outgoing, confident, and used to performing in front of people. Some of them had even performed in last year's talent show. She wasn't like them. She had never sung in front of a crowd. She had never held a real microphone. She didn't even know what to wear. Still, something inside her told her not to. Back out. That evening, as soon as she got home, she went straight to her room. She locked the door, grabbed her speaker, and stood in front of the mirror. She played her favorite song, the one she chose for the audition. A slow, emotional song that matched how she felt deep inside. She took a deep breath and began singing. Her voice was clear but nervous. Her hands trembled. She knew every word, but still her lips shook. She stopped halfway. "What if I sound terrible on stage?" she whispered to herself. Her confidence had always been delicate, like thin glass. One crack, and it could fall apart. But she didn't give up. She played the song again and again. For hours, she stood there singing over and over until her voice started to feel stronger. Her reflection in the mirror no longer looked unsure, looked hopeful. The next day at school, a few students were talking about the upcoming auditions. One said he was going to play guitar. Another said she'd been training with a vocal coach. She just stood nearby, quietly listening. No one knew she had signed up. Later in the day, her best friend found her in the schoolyard. "Why didn't you tell me you're auditioning?" they asked, smiling. She looked down and replied softly, "I didn't want to say anything in case I changed my mind." "You won't," the friend said. "I know you won't." That small sentence gave her a little strength, just a little, but enough to help her keep going. That evening, she changed things up. Instead of singing alone, she asked her friend to listen. It was the first time someone other than her mirror had heard her sing the full song. She was nervous, but she did it anyway. Her voice cracked a little at the start, but as she kept going, the fear slowly faded. When she finished, her friend clapped softly. "You have something special," they said. "Don't let anyone take that away." It was the first time she believed it, even just a little. The day before the audition, school held a short meeting for all the performers. The stage lights were being tested, and a few teachers talked about how things would go. She sat in the back, quietly listening, holding her song lyrics in her hand, even though she had memorized them. She looked at the stage and imagined herself standing there, singing. It didn't feel as impossible as before. She wasn't fully confident yet, but she was ready to try at night. She couldn't sleep again. Not from fear, but from excitement mixed with worry. What if she forgot the words? What if she froze? What if she didn't? What if her voice, the one she had hidden for so long, could finally be heard? She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "Just sing for you, no one else. Just sing for you." And that's what she planned to do. The day of the audition arrived. She stood in front of the mirror one last time, holding her brush like a microphone. Her hair was brushed neatly and she wore her favorite sweater, nothing too fancy, but it made her feel comfortable. Her hands were cold and her stomach felt strange, like butterflies flying around. She didn't eat much that morning, just a few bites of toast. Her thoughts were filled with worry and hope. As she walked to school, every step felt heavier than usual. She kept going over the lyrics in her mind, again and again, trying not to mess anything up. When she reached the school hall, the stage was already set. A few students were standing around, talking nervously, warming up their voices or playing instruments softly. The lights above the stage were bright. A long table had been placed in front of the stage where the teachers sat, holding clipboards. Her name was called in the middle of the list. She sat quietly, watching others perform before her. Were confident and loud. Some danced, some played piano, some forgot their lines but laughed it off. Then it was her turn. Her legs felt shaky as she stood. Her heart beat so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She climbed the steps slowly and stood in the center of the stage. The microphone looked bigger now, more real. She looked out at the empty chairs in the audience. A few students and teachers watched her. She gave a small nod to the sound operator, and the music began. She took a deep breath and started to sing. At first, her voice was soft, a little unsure, but it was steady. She focused on the lyrics, on the feeling behind the words. She didn't try to sing like anyone else. She just let her voice flow from the heart. Then it happened. From the side of the room, a boy whispered something. She caught it. He laughed quietly. Then another student giggled beside him. She heard one of them say, "She sounds like a broken bird." The words hit her like cold water. Her voice trembled. For a second, she almost stopped singing. Tightened, her throat felt dry. She wanted to disappear, but she didn't stop. She looked down at the stage floor, avoiding their eyes, and kept going. Her voice was no longer strong. She rushed through the second verse and ended the song quicker than planned. When the music stopped, the room was quiet. No one clapped at first. Then a teacher smiled and gave a gentle nod. A few students clapped politely, but she didn't look up. She walked off the stage, heartbroken. She sat in the hallway alone, hiding. Behind a wall, Her hands covered her face. Her eyes burned with tears. She had waited for this moment for so long. But a few cruel words had stolen all her strength. Her friend came and sat beside her. "You were brave," they said softly. "Don't let them take that from you." But she didn't feel brave. It felt small. The boy's voice kept repeating in her mind. "Broken bird, broken bird." It echoed louder than the song she had just sung. She didn't speak the rest of the day. She avoided eye contact. She didn't even go to the music board to check the audition results. That night, back in her room, she sat in silence. Her speaker was off. Her mirror stood still. She didn't sing, not even a note. For the first time in a long while, her voice was completely quiet, and in her heart, something had cracked. The days after the audition felt heavy. She walked through school quietly, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Halls felt louder than usual. It's filled with laughter and noise, but none of it reached her. She no longer stopped near the music board. She didn't want to know if she made it or not. She didn't want to hear more laughter. She didn't want more eyes on her. Her voice, the one that once lived in her room, in her heart, had gone silent. At home, she didn't sing anymore. Not even in the shower. Not while doing chores. The speaker in her room gathered dust. The hairbrush she used to pretend was a microphone now just sat on her dresser, untouched. She tried to act normal around her family, but they noticed something had changed. She wasn't humming anymore. She wasn't smiling much. She kept to herself more than usual. Her friend tried to talk to her at lunch. They told her not to give up, said her voice was beautiful, but the words didn't reach her. She nodded, said she was fine, but inside, she didn't believe it. All she could remember was the whisper and the laugh from the boy in the room, Broken Bird. It played in her head like a cruel song on repeat. She started to doubt everything. Maybe she wasn't good enough. Maybe her voice didn't matter. Maybe it was silly to think that singing could mean something. One evening she opened her notebook. It was full of song lyrics and little poems she had written over the years, ages, filled with feelings she never said out loud. She flipped through them slowly, touching the words with her fingers. But after a while, she closed it and pushed it back under her bed. She couldn't even look at the words anymore. The worst part wasn't the laugh. It wasn't even the whisper. The worst part was how it made her feel like she wasn't enough. Like her dream was just a joke, and once that thought took root in her mind, it grew fast. At school, the final list for the talent show was pinned on the wall. Students gathered around to see who made it. She walked past it without looking, even. When her friend excitedly said, "Your name's on the list," she just shook her head and kept walking. She didn't want to be in the show anymore. She didn't want to stand on that stage again. She started avoiding music class. She gave excuses to leave early or stay quiet during singing activities. Her teacher noticed. One day the teacher asked if everything was okay. She forced a smile and said, "Just tired." But inside she felt hollow. Everything that once made her feel alive music, lyrics. Melodies now made her feel embarrassed. She spent her nights staring at the ceiling, thinking about what could have been. Just one moment, one laugh had changed everything. Her friend didn't give up on her. They left notes in her locker, small ones with kind words. "Your voice made me feel something," one note said. "Don't hide it." But she didn't respond. She had fallen into a place where even love and kindness couldn't reach her. At least not yet. She wasn't angry. She wasn't crying. She was just numb. The world moved on. The other students practiced their parts. The show was coming closer. Posters were put up. Rehearsals started, and she stayed in the background, invisible, quiet, lost in her own silence. She had once dreamed of singing in front of people, but now she just wanted to disappear. Her voice was still inside her, but she had locked it away. Far from the noise, far from the laughter, she didn't know if it would ever come back. Days passed. She kept herself hidden, not just from others, but from who she used to be. The girl who once sang to the stars in her bedroom was now quiet. And still, the talent show was just a few days away, and everyone around her seemed excited. Posters were up on every wall. Rehearsals were in full swing. Students practiced during lunch breaks and after school. The school was filled with music, but none of it reached her. She had stopped going near the auditorium, even hearing music. From far away made her heart ache. She kept telling herself she would drop out. No one would care. No one would miss her performance. She believed it was better to leave than to face the stage again. Then something unexpected happened. One afternoon, when she opened her locker, a folded piece of paper fell out. She looked around quickly, unsure who had left it. She picked it up slowly and opened it. It wasn't long. Just a few simple words written in neat handwriting. "Your voice gave me goosebumps. Please don't stop singing." Her hands froze. For a long moment she just stared at the note. It wasn't signed. There was no name. She didn't know who had written it. But the words went straight to her heart. She read them again and again. Someone had listened. Someone had felt something when she sang. Someone saw, beyond her nervous voice, beyond her shaky hands. She stood still for a while, holding the note close to her chest. A warm feeling slowly spread inside her. She hadn't felt anything like that in days. That night, she sat on the edge of her bed, holding the note. The room was quiet. The speaker on her table was still off, but her eyes kept going back to those words. For the first time in many days, she picked up the hairbrush again. She didn't turn on the music. She didn't even sing. She just stood there, staring at herself in the mirror. Was it really possible that someone had been moved by her voice? Was it possible that she still had something to give? The next day, she sat with her friend again. She didn't say much. But this time, she didn't pull away when her friend spoke kindly to her. Later that evening, when she was alone, she finally turned her speaker back on. She picked the same song, the one she had chosen for the show. She closed her eyes and let the music start. This time, she didn't think about the boy who laughed. She didn't think about the mistakes she made on stage. She didn't think about what people might say. She just thought about why she loved to sing. Slowly, her lips moved. Her voice came out. A little shaky at first, but steady. As the song played, her voice grew stronger. The words flowed out like they had always lived inside her. She sang like no one was watching. She didn't know who wrote the note, but it reminded her of something important. Her voice had value. Even if just one person listened and felt something, that was enough. She looked at herself in the mirror again. Her eyes were still tired, but they weren't empty anymore. There was a small light returning. She wasn't sure if she could perform at the show. She didn't know if she had the strength yet. But for the first time in a while, she wanted to. Try again, not to prove anything, not to be the best, just to feel like herself again. And sometimes it's all it takes. A few kind words to bring someone back to life. The day of the talent show finally arrived. School was filled with noise and excitement. Students rushed around with costumes, props, and nervous laughter. Music echoed from the auditorium. Everyone was busy. Everyone was ready. She stood quietly near the back entrance, holding her folded lyric sheet in her hand. She had already memorized the words, but the paper gave her comfort. It reminded her of how far she had come. She still didn't know who had written that kind message in her locker, but it had stayed with her every day since. She had read it over and over. It had helped her stand in front of the mirror again. It had helped her turn on the speaker again. And now, it had helped her show up here today. She wasn't sure she was brave, but she was here. Maybe that was enough. One of the teachers called out the performers' names and guided them backstage. She followed quietly. Her name was somewhere near the middle of the list. As she waited, her hands grew cold. Her throat felt tight. Behind the curtain, she peeked out at the crowd. The seats were full. Parents, students, and teachers filled the room. The lights were bright. The stage looked bigger than ever. Her heart pounded in her chest. One by one, students went up and performed. Some sang cheerful songs. Some danced with big smiles. Some played instruments beautifully. The crowd clapped after each one. When the student before her finished, the teacher backstage gave her a small nod. "You're next." Her knees almost gave out. Her breath became short. But she took one small step forward, then another. She walked toward the stage. The curtain opened. The spotlight came on. She stood in the center, gripping the microphone. The lights were so bright she couldn't see the crowd clearly, but she could feel them watching. Her stomach twisted. She took a deep breath. She gave a nod to the sound. Operator, the music began. For a moment, she forgot everything. She forgot the people. She forgot the fear. She closed her eyes and sang. The first few lines were quiet, but steady. Her voice carried the feeling behind every word. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. She remembered all the nights she had sung in front of her mirror. She remembered the tears, the silence, the doubt, and now all of it was coming out through her voice. As the song moved into the chorus, her voice grew stronger. She didn't need to see the crowd anymore. She wasn't singing for them. She was singing for herself, for the girl who almost gave up, for the part of her that refused to stay quiet. By the final note, the room was silent. For a moment, it felt like the whole world had paused. Then the sound of clapping slowly filled the room, not polite claps. Real ones, loud, long. Some students even stood up. She opened her eyes and looked around in disbelief. Her teacher was clapping with a smile. Some students had tears in their eyes. Even her friend in the front row was cheering softly with both hands raised. She felt something warm rise in her chest. Not pride, not victory, just relief, joy, a sense of being whole again. As she walked off the stage, a student she barely knew whispered, "That was beautiful." She nodded, still too overwhelmed to speak. Backstage, she stood quietly, her hands still shaking, but this time, it wasn't fear. It was something new, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She had done it not to prove anyone wrong, not to impress anyone, but because deep down, she had something worth sharing, and she finally believed that her voice mattered. After the show, the hallway outside the auditorium buzzed with energy. Students were talking, laughing, hugging each other. Some took pictures. Some shared snacks. Everyone looked excited and proud. She stood near a wall, watching it all quietly. Her heart was still beating fast. She couldn't believe what had just happened. For a few minutes on stage, it had felt like time stood still. Her friend ran up to her and pulled her into a hug. "You are amazing," they whispered. "I'm so proud of you." She didn't know what to say. She just smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in a long while. Other students came up to her too, some she barely knew. Few gave her high fives. One girl said, "Your song made me cry." Another added, "You have a gift. Don't stop." Shh. Didn't expect any of it. And that made it even more special. But the most surprising moment came when she turned to leave. The boy who had laughed at her during the audition was standing nearby. For a second, their eyes met. He looked uncomfortable, unsure.
Ow.
Then, without saying a word, he looked down and walked away. She didn't need an apology. She didn't feel angry. Something inside her had changed. His words had once broken her, but now they held no power. Her voice had spoken louder than his whisper ever could. That night, she got home. She sat on her bed and pulled out her notebook from under the bed. She opened the first page. All her lyrics and poems were still there. She smiled as she read the old lines. They didn't feel heavy anymore. She picked up her pen and began writing a new page. Not because she had to, not to prepare for another show, but because her heart felt full again. Her speaker played softly in the background. Her room felt warm, safe. She sang again, not for practice, not for anyone else, just for herself. The girl who once stood in silence now sang without fear. The next morning at school, she was surprised to find another note in her locker. This time, it was signed. It was from the girl who performed before her at the show. The note read, "I was so nervous before my turn. Then I heard you sing. Your voice gave me courage. Thank you." Her eyes filled with tears as she held the note. She had never thought her voice could help someone else. But now she understood that sometimes the very thing you're afraid to share is what others need the most. In the following weeks, things slowly changed. She joined the music club, not to compete, but to learn. She started writing new songs. Sometimes she shared them with the group. Sometimes she sang just a few lines during breaks. She was still the quiet girl in some ways, but no longer afraid. Fear hadn't disappeared completely, but it no longer controlled her, and that made all the difference. She never forgot the hurt she felt, or the silence that followed. But more importantly, she never forgot the moment she found her voice again. It took one kind message, one small push, one honest song. She had once thought her voice was too small, too soft, too easy to break. But now she knew the truth. It wasn't broken, it was real. And real things, no matter how soft, have power. Her voice had touched hearts, including her own. And this time, she wasn't going to let it go quiet again.